I want to welcome you back to the D-Lo Show. I am your host, Ryan D-Lo Delozier, and I want to cover a new case today with you here today. I know typically I've been covering some Yakima stuff, but kind of want to hit on some of these big nationwide cases. So I've got one here that I found out just recently that I want to cover as well too. It's the Siders family from Ohio, and I want to go over that case. It's an interesting case. It's hitting the news kind of big time right now. So I wanted to go over just some of the details of it. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, that's why I'm going over it, because it's in Ohio, which is like a little bit over a half a country away from us right here. So the Siders family, it's a family from Ohio, and it's at the center of an ongoing criminal investigation in Vinton County where it's involving this severe, prolonged child neglect and abuse. So you may have heard of this one, maybe not. That's why I'm going over it. So here's a quick summary of the case based on current reports that go along with this. So the way they came across right here, someone's going to go over this. So on June 30th of 2026, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and the warrant was initially related to a separate investigation into indecent exposure incidents allegedly committed by a 36-year-old man named Gary Siders Jr. So the police show up to serve this warrant that they have on indecent exposure, and during the search, investigators unexpectedly discovered 16 children living in the home. Yeah, 16 children there in this house, unexpectedly. Like, they were not expecting really any children to be there. They're expecting to go there, find Gary Siders Jr., and ask him why you've been exposing yourself 4 times to people. And so they go there, they find 16 kids, and the home was reportedly in this state of disrepair with the floors rotted from filth that was going on with it. And there were 4 adults that lived there. Okay, 4 adults. So there was Gary Siders Jr., and he's 36 years old. He is the father of these 16 children. And then there's Elizabeth Siders, and she's 33 years old. So just kind of get that age right there. Okay, 36 father, 36 mother. Elizabeth Siders, she's 33. And then there's Gary Siders Sr., which is Gary Siders' dad. He's living there. He's the grandfather of these 16 children. Supposed grandfather. We haven't quite figured that out yet. I'll get to those details later. He's 73. And then Christina Siders, she's 67, and she is the grandmother. So those were the adults in this house. And the children that were there, so there's 16 children, and they range in ages from 20 months to 18 years old. So according to the Ohio Attorney General's office, the children were found confined to a single 12-foot by 12-foot room and they were in this room, this 12 by 12 room, that's 144 square feet, okay, not very big. And while they're in there, these children were in a severe state of neglect, including being covered in insects and feces. The children were immediately removed from the home, and they were transported to local hospitals, while some of them were treated and released into custody of the Ohio Department of Child and Family Services. Others remained hospitalized in serious condition. And I even understand that in some cases, I have to go back and double check on this, but I understand that a child or 2 that was at that house actually had to be life flighted out of there. The condition was so bad. And remember, I want you to recall here why the police are there. Okay, they weren't there because there's 16 children that have feces, living in a feces, 12 by 12 feces, insect infested place. No, they went there because the dad, Gary Siders Sr., Gary Siders Jr., was had some accusations of indecent exposure. So the background going along with this, again, anyways, Elizabeth Siders, attorney, she confirmed that she is the biological mother of all 16 children that are in this house. So she is the mother. Okay, they confirmed that. Elizabeth Siders' attorney had confirmed that she is the biological mother of all 16 children. So confirmed it. I don't know, we're probably still going to wait on a DNA test to make sure that all these kids are Elizabeth's kids. She married Gary Siders Jr. in West Virginia in 2008 when she was 15, and he was 18. Which, that seems kind of weird, huh? But in West Virginia, that was legal at the time. So again, you see they're 33 years old. Elizabeth's 33 right now. So that is not too many years ago. We're talking, you go 33 minus 15, you're looking at, what is that, 17 years right there, a difference. So, yeah, back then in 2008 when that happened, when they were married, it doesn't seem like that long ago to me. Maybe it does to you, but that does not seem that long ago that it would, and that just seems really weird to me that would be legal, but it's West Virginia. Authorities believe the family moved frequently across several Ohio counties over the years and actively avoided creating medical, social, or creating medical, school, and government records for the children. So they're like, the presumption is that this family is moving around to avoid any sort of record that they even have children. Neighbors and local officials reported being completely unaware that any children lived at the Hamden residence. However, records indicate that in 2021, this is the Gallia County Sheriff's Office attempted to serve truancy papers to the parents after 6 of the children had not attended school for months. So as I mentioned before, the police were there to to serve a warrant for Gary Siders Jr., and then they wound up arresting the other 3 adults as well, too, along with Gary. So all 4 adults pleaded not guilty to the charges, and their bonds were initially set at $300,000 each. Gary Siders Sr. was later granted a bond modification and released to a hospital due to health concerns with a condition of GPS monitoring. And Elizabeth Siders' attorney had urged the public to let the case play out, suggesting that she may have been isolated and shaped by her circumstances, having married so young. Remember, she was married at 15, Gary was 18, and then there's this grandparent that Gary Siders Sr. is living in the house as well, too. So, again, the attorney right here wants the public to let this play out, because Elizabeth had married so young, and then noted that her primary concern upon his visit to the jail was the welfare of her children. Okay, so that's just one of the attorney wanted people to know that the primary concern of Elizabeth Siders is that that her children are doing okay. So as I mentioned before, the police arrived at the house. They were expecting to go and arrest Gary Siders Jr., who allegedly committed indecent exposure. Okay, so, and I was wondering, what was he accused of doing? So court records from Vinton County show that Gary Siders Jr. was charged with 4 counts, 4 of public indecency stemming from 4 separate incidents. Okay, according to the allegations, he recklessly exposed his private area to people outside of his family on May 23rd, May 27th, May 29th, and May 30th. Okay, so those are specific dates that are going along with this, and the specific details of what occurred during these encounters have not been heavily detailed by investigators. So this is a separate public indecency investigation, and the resulting arrest warrant are what originally led the authorities to the residence where the children were discovered. And so again, for 4 people to say this, I was wondering, what's he doing? Is he flashing people as they walking by? Were they neighbors? Were they passerbys? Were they children? Who were these people that reported him for indecent exposure? And again, specific details regarding who the victims or witnesses were during the 4 public indecency incidents have not been publicly released by authorities, but court records state broadly that the incidents took place outside of the family's home on Omer Street in Hamden, Ohio, and involved him recklessly exposing his private area to, quote, members of the public, exposing his member to members of the public. Yes, on May 23rd, 27th, 29th, and 31st. Okay, law enforcement and media requests for detailed incident reports regarding those specific misdemeanor charges have not yet been disclosed, the identities or specific relationship of those involved. And so I was wondering, like, when the police rolled up, like, remember, they're expecting to go there and find Gary Siders Jr. They're expecting to find him, arrest him question him, arrest him on these indecent exposure things. And when they entered, they actually were allowed to enter the residence because they were executing a search warrant. And the warrant was obtained as part of an unrelated investigation, specifically stemming from the separate public indecency charges against Gary Siders Jr. Investigators have stated that they were entirely unaware that children were inside the home and did not expect to find them when they carried out the search. Another question I had on this one. So, Elizabeth Siders, she married Gary when she was 15 and he was 18. And I've said that before, okay? And I'm just curious, like, is this legal in the state of Ohio, or is it legal in any state? So Elizabeth Siders and Gary, again, they were married in 2008, and they did so in Mason County, West Virginia, rather than Ohio. That's where they were at the time. And again, remember I said something about them moving around, trying to avoid. This might have been that part of that as well, too. So at that time, West Virginia laws allowed marriages at lower ages. 2008 again, okay, not too many years ago, less than 20 years ago, West Virginia law allowed marriages at lower ages under specific legal provisions. Okay, officials noted that the marriage was authorized by a judge's approval and parental consent, as the state's laws permitted marriages for minors under specific judicial or parental guidelines. So they're married in West Virginia. Okay, they're married in West Virginia. I'm wondering, are there other states that allow a 15-year-old to marry an 18-year-old? It just seems, I've taught high school. There's a huge difference in that gap right there between a child, a boy or a girl, is 15, and the other person who is 18 as well. 18 is an adult. They can vote. They can go to war. They can do a lot of things at 18. 15, you can't even drive a car yet, at least not in the state of Washington. Okay, so there are states. And again, yes, there are. There are other states that allow a 15-year-old to marry an 18-year-old, and the laws have changed significantly in recent years with widespread legislative push to ban child marriage. Numerous states historically allowed, and in some cases still allow, minors aged 15 or younger to marry under specific legal exceptions, typically requiring parental consent, judicial approval, or both. At the time of Elizabeth and Gary Siders Jr.'s marriage in 2008, and across different jurisdictions, states with lower minimum ages, so a majority of the U.S. states historically permitted minors, so 16 or under or younger, and sometimes 15, to marry. For instance, states like Hawaii and Kansas have historically set a judicial minimum age of 15 with parental and court consent. The West Virginia context, so in 2008, West Virginia law allowed females aged 14 or 15 to marry with parental consent and a judge's authorization. So West Virginia later reformed its laws, eventually setting the minimum age of 18 with no exceptions. And the current national landscape going along with this is that child marriage laws have seen these major overhauls going along with this. Like we should definitely know this, okay? A growing number of states, including neighboring states like Ohio, as well as states like Washington, Oregon, New York, Massachusetts, and Michigan, have enacted total bans, setting an absolute minimum age at 18 with zero exceptions. However, a significant number of states still permit underage marriage under various conditional frameworks. So in my mind, the minimum age of 18 makes perfect sense. Seems like it should be a nationwide thing. So the question would be, though, for what reason would a judge, a judge who gets to decide after the jury does, they get to decide the sentence on what happens with criminals. They're going a lot of the things that judges do. Okay, what would a judge think? For what reason would a judge think it's okay for a 15 or 14-year-old to marry an adult? So historically, When a judge or state law allows a 14 or 15-year-old to marry an adult, it was typically driven by specific legal exceptions, social traditions, or a perceived quote-unquote emergency context. The primary reason judges or legal frameworks historically approved these unions include pregnancy, so to make it the legitimization of children. By far the most common reason a judge would grant a waiver for a minor to marry was if the minor was pregnant or had already given birth. Okay, in past decades, the legal or social framework placed heavy emphasis on ensuring a child was born legitimate. Okay, this is again in the past decades, not so much anymore. That would be probably in a lot of these cases would be considered rape if you're an adult. Yeah. Anyways, impregnating someone who's 14. Yeah. So, but it made the child was born legitimate within a marriage, leading courts to view marriage as a solution to rectify or normalize teen pregnancy. And then there was the parent consent and authority. So historically, the law heavily respected the doctrine of parental rights. If parents give their blessing, courts often treated the petition as a family matter, assuming parents were acting on their child's best financial or social interests. And we're seeing how this is going with the Siders family, right? How they were acting in the best interest of their children. The 16 children they put in a 12 by 12 cage. Yeah. Parental. Sometimes parents do not make the best decisions for their children. And then avoiding, again, this is, but I should go back, that they're accused of, assuming that did happen. But yeah, we're not, but they are innocent until proven guilty. Avoiding criminal prosecution. So in many jurisdictions, there's this loophole right here. In many jurisdictions, an adult who impregnated or had a sexual relationship with someone below the age of consent, statutory rape, could completely shield themselves from criminal prosecution by marrying the victim. Judges sometimes found themselves rubber stamping marriages, effectively designating or designed to keep an adult out of prison or to fix a legal infraction. And then there's also economic hardship or emancipation. So in older legal traditions, marriage was viewed as a mechanism to transfer the financial responsibility of a dependent minor from a struggling family to an adult provider, or to grant legal adult status, so emancipation, to a youth who needed to enter the workforce or manage property. Modern children advocacy groups and lawmakers heavily criticize these exact justifications, pointing out that what was framed as a remedy often trapped minors, particularly young girls, in situations involving severe isolation, lack of personal autonomy, and the inability to access legal protections like divorce or domestic violence shelters without adult guardians. This growing recognition is why a majority of states have moved to eliminate judicial waivers entirely. So moving back to the case right here, I was wondering, how many children did the state realize that the Siders family had? So investigators stated the family largely avoided establishing medical and governmental records, but they were moving across various Ohio counties. Again, since 2008, since they were married in West Virginia, moved to Ohio. The state and local agencies were generally unaware that the Siders had children, let alone 16. However, prior touch points with the state did exist in limited instances. So here's a couple examples. So their school and truancy records from Gallia County showed that 6 of the children were previously enrolled at local elementary schools. In late 2021, the Gallia County Sheriff's Office attempted to serve truancy-related court papers after those children had not attended school for months. Those cases were ultimately closed in January of 2022 because authorities could not locate the family to serve the papers. And then there's also some hospital birth records. So certain hospital records indicate that some births, including twins that were born in 2022, generated local health department or hospital documentation, though officials noted that the family otherwise successfully avoided creating a comprehensive trail of government or school records for most of the children over the years. So aside from those isolated historical records, law enforcement and child welfare agencies had no active indication that 16 children were living inside the Vinton County home until the June 2026 search warrant was executed. So from when she was 15 years old until she was 33 years old, Elizabeth had 16 children. Okay, there. So of those kids, it sounds like all 16 of them, Elizabeth is the mother, but could someone else be a father there is one of the ones too. So do we know? And so initially the children were, when they were first discovered, investigators did not know for certain whether the adults in the home were the biological parents. And an attorney representing Elizabeth stated that his understanding that she is the biological mother of all 16, meaning she would have given birth on a near annual basis over the 18-year span. Official tracking of birth certificates and formal confirmation through forensic testing or comprehensive state records has remained an ongoing part of the investigation as authorities piece together the family's sparse documentation. So what's next for this case? As the criminal case progresses through the Vinton County Court of Common Pleas, several key legal and investigative steps are unfolding. So there's the grand jury indictments. Following the defendant's waiver of their preliminary hearings, the case moves toward presentation to a grand jury for formal indictments, which will transition the second-degree felony child endangerment charges into the trial court phase. And then there's the special prosecutors and gag orders going along with this as well, too. So local prosecutors have requested assistance from the Ohio Attorney General's office and outside prosecutors to handle the scope of the case. Additionally, courts have issued gag orders, so non-dissemination orders, to limit the public release of investigative details and protect the integrity of the proceedings and the privacy of the victims. As you've noticed, I just don't have a lot of answers for a lot of this stuff as I've been going through because of these gag orders that go along with it. Not a lot of information is being being sent out. There's the competency and medical evaluation. So legal teams are currently evaluating the defendants, particularly 73-year-old Gary Siders Sr., whose defense raised concerns regarding his health and competency to stand trial. And there's also child welfare and forensic verification. The 16 children remain in the temporary custody of the Ohio Department of Children and Youth, Job and Family Services, receiving medical and psychological care. Meanwhile, investigators continue working to officially verify parentage, map out the family's history across various Ohio counties, and comb through recovered evidence. So where are Gary Jr., Gary Sr., Elizabeth, and Christina now? Are any of them incarcerated? So 3 of the 4 adults are incarcerated, while 1 has been released. Again, Gary Sr. under specific medical and legal conditions. So Gary Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina remain held in the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail. Their bonds are initially set at $300,000 cash, and they continue to await further court proceedings as the case moves toward a grand jury presentation. And then Gary Siders Sr., he's a 73-year-old grandfather. He is out of jail following a medical emergency and a fall during the transport to court. His $300,000 bond was modified by a judge to recognize a bond or to recognizance, so that he's just released on his own. He was transferred to a hospital for serious medical treatment and ordered to undergo a competency evaluation with GPS monitoring mandated if released from medical care. So recall that these children are aged 20 months to 18 years old, and frequently they're cited in reports as approximately 1.5 to 18 years old. Because the family largely avoided creating formal government and medical records over the years, authorities have not publicly released a full breakdown of the individual names or the exact ages of the 16 children. So if one of them does happen to be 18 legally, because an 18-year-old has reached the age of majority in Ohio, they are not subject to the state's foster care system or mandatory child welfare custody. So when children are removed from protective custody situations, the adult status an 18-year-old is a legal adult and cannot be forced into a foster home or a shelter by Child Protective Services against their will. They have the right to choose where they live. They can walk away, or they can even live independently. So if one of these children who is in this house is 18 years old, he or she could, in theory, be on their own right now. Practical realities and support, while they cannot be legally detained by the state like minor children, an 18-year-old coming out of an environment of extreme isolation, medical neglect, and trauma often requires immediate medical care, specialized transition housing, or support services. And so in cases like this, protective agencies or medical facilities typically offer voluntary transitional housing, medical rehabilitation, and adult social support services to help them navigate independent life, but participation is voluntary. And it is said that the abuse in this case that we are seeing is sometimes even referred to as a family dynamic. So what does that mean? Well, when experts and psychologists describe a situation like the Siders case as a family dynamic, they are referring to a deeply entrenched system of behaviors, beliefs, power structures, and coping mechanisms that dictate how members interact with one another and the outside world. So describing abuse as a family dynamic often carries specific implications. There's a collective isolation that goes along with this. So it implies that the abusive or neglectful behavior was not just an isolated incident committed by one person, but a shared, normalized environment. So the family likely functioned in a closed, insular system that deliberately cut off ties with the outside world. So schools, medical professionals, extended family, neighbors, they didn't really interact with them. This is to prevent outsiders from seeing what was really going on inside that house. Now, a family dynamic implies that different members fell into entrenched roles that kept the system functioning, such as dominant figures exerting control, others enabling or passively accepting the abuse out of fear or brainwashing, and younger members being socialized to view extreme deprivation and confinement as normal. These were the shared roles, and then the complicity that comes along with those as well. And then there's intergenerational transmission. So there's multiple generations. There's grandparents in this house, okay, Gary Sr., there's his son, Junior. There's the kids, 16 kids in there. So they have this intergenerational transmission when multiple generations, such as grandparents, parents, and children, living in the same abusive environment. Just because you have your grandparents living with you doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But when there's abuse that passes down generation to generation, that can create this culture of acceptance that goes along with it. It suggests a severe breakdown of protective instincts and a pattern where dysfunctional or abusive coping mechanisms are passed down and accepted as standard operating procedure. And then there's the coercive control. Psychologists use this phrase to highlight that a pervasive climate of fear, manipulation, and psychological dominance likely governed the household, where the boundaries between right and wrong were entirely rewritten by those figures in charge. Ultimately, calling it a family dynamic explains how a household can maintain such extreme, prolonged conditions in plain sight, because to the people inside that closed ecosystem, the dysfunction had become their entire reality. So as I wrap up this episode, just a few notable aspects to highlight the scope and context of this ongoing case that's going on. This is fairly new. It's going to take a while to unfold this one. So there's the tragic medical history. So public records and investigative updates revealed that in November 2022, Elizabeth Siders gave birth to conjoined twins who tragically passed away the same day of natural causes, making one of the rare recorded touch points the family had with institutional healthcare systems over the years. So that's one of them. There's the tragic medical history. Then there's the comparison to other historical cases. So legal analysts and media outlets frequently compare the Siders case to other long-term captivity and severe neglect cases, most notably the Turpin family case in California from a decade prior. Due to the large number of children concealed from society, extreme domestic squalor, and total isolation from the educational and medical infrastructure. And then there's the scope of the changes. While the 4 adults currently face 16 second-degree felony counts of endangering children, 1 count for each of the children who were living in that house, prosecutors have indicated that additional and upgraded charges are widely expected as the investigation continues, forensic reviews of the home, and interviews with the victims progress. So I'm going to keep my eye on this case as we're going through, and I'll try to give you some updates going on, but I just found it, this is definitely one that is out there. It's not something you hear about every day. You know, we get murders and stuff, and like I did last week when I covered the Cassidy Rainwater case, I mean, it's similar. That was in Lebanon, Missouri, in that area right there, and just, you know, we have stuff like that goes on right here in Yakima as well, too, where people just kind of disappear, and it's sometimes an accident that we even know that they're gone because of the things that are going on in their lives. This is definitely an outlier case. I hadn't heard of anything like this. This was really, I know I was driving around, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. You may or may not know that, and I just happened to hear this one, and I found that very, very weird. This one's out there a little bit. So I am going to continue to cover some of this and listen to some of the things on it, find out what's going on with it, and I will report some things back to you as well. If you have any other cases that you want me to cover, go ahead and just reach out to me on social medias, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on others too as well. You can always comment in whatever you're listening to me on. So Apple.